On the 18th of March, Liz Kendall, the Secretary of State for the Department of Work and Pensions, announced a series of changes to benefits eligibility, especially those related to disability, and cuts aimed at saving £5 billion by 2030. This is the latest attempt to solve a long-running mystery. Where has all the money gone? Naturally, because this is the UK, we're not allowed to give the obvious answer, which is that the rich have taken it all and austerity has been a political project that redistributes wealth from the poorest to the richest. Instead, as so many of us predicted before the election, the government has decided that its benefits claimants and the disabled who have in fact hoarded all of the money. This represents the largest cut to welfare since 2015, and it has raised a lot of anxieties both in myself and obviously among those claiming benefits, especially those related to disability. For one, it reminded me that health is impermanent. When I see how we treat disabled people in this country, it scares me, not only on behalf of the disabled, but on behalf of myself. One day, all of us will have our health fail in some fashion. We will need to be taken care of and to have some adjustments made for us. Think about my aunt. 6-7 years ago, she was a relatively healthy woman in her late 50s. Now she's dead, after living with a disabling condition for years. Thankfully, she was taken care of and loved until the end, but not everyone is so fortunate as to have a family like that, to have a support network that isn't the state. Originally, I was going to do a video about this when the proposals were leaked to the press, but I felt too angry to be coherent. Now, I feel obligated to say something, because I know for a fact that a lot of my regular audience have had to interact with the benefits system, particularly around disability, and I know it's really hard, and I know some of them are scared. And I want to try to give some voice to some of that, to let them know that we see it and that they're not alone. I also want to explain to you that if you do believe that benefits in the UK are too generous, you're wrong. You're buying into a lie, and that lie is killing people. It may be too late for all of the people who have died since 2010, but it's not too late now for a lot of people. It's easy to boil these people down to a statistic, but every single one of them had friends, families, loved ones who missed them. That's what moved me in particular. These are people who have rich inner lives, who enrich the lives of others with their presence, and now they're facing utter devastation. To put it simply, it's wrong, and you're wrong if you support it. In the aftermath of Liz Kendall's announcements, there was understandably a lot of discussion on benefits, disability, and all of the surrounding issues about that. A lot of it was reasonably respectful, though of course you'd get the occasional Labour supporter claiming coercing people into work through starvation was morally correct. That's a sad indictment of them, but it wasn't that kind of comment that moved me. It was a post on Blue Sky that I will read to you in full because I am still kind of stunned by it. The threshold of what qualifies as a disability is too low now. The definition is capturing too many people. ADHD, anxiety, being a bit depressed, not the depression which completely poleaxes you, these should not count. We have to protect working people from exploitation. I would also like to note at this point that they spelled poleaxe wrong when they presumably meant the medieval weapon and not an axe that asks you who you intend to vote for at the next election. I'm not exaggerating when I say that I saw this, that I was stunned. To see something so totally incorrect and cruel confidently stated, like, I actually sat at my desk, which is right here, trying to parse what this person was saying. It was beyond the usual limits of hawkish attitudes towards benefits that we'd seen because it was so precise in its disdain and its ableism. I'll get into all the ways that's wrong in a second, but I actually was shocked that someone said this with their name attached to it. When I show you the posts I will have shown it to you earlier. I won't include the person's name, but they posted this with a picture of themselves and their first name. It wouldn't be hard to recognize this person if you knew them or encountered them in real life, and here they are saying things like this. This statement was not only wrong, which is bad, but fixable. This was a fundamentally soulless way to view the world. It's the ultimate conclusion of a multiple front war on the most vulnerable people in our society, mostly manifested in awful documentary series, and I use that term loosely, like Benefit Street, disgusting reality TV shows, and ableism in British comedy like Little Britain. And yes, I'm sorry that you have to be reminded that that show exists, but it is a non-trivial contributor to this. It is anti-human and frankly evil to speak like this. And I know that sounds exaggerated, but what else could you call someone confidently saying things like this? What else can we really say about the atmosphere that produced this? This is evil, and it's past time we addressed it in those terms. Now on to all the reasons why, if you support the government on this, or indeed any previous government's cuts to benefits, you're wrong. I will be primarily referring to that post on Blue Sky because I think it really neatly summarizes the core of the issue, which is fundamentally that people believe two things. One, the welfare system is too generous, either in amount of money or support or the criteria to qualify for benefits. Two, therefore, because of that generosity, the amount of spending on welfare is too high. Now, to nip the issue of point 2 in the bud, the amount of money spent on welfare for working age adults in Britain is going up and is projected to go up. That's because of a variety of factors, including poor working conditions, leading to mental health issues, a mass disabling event in the form of COVID-19, and the population just growing. More people means more claimants of both in-work and unemployment benefits. This has been presented by Prime Minister Keir Starmer as a moral issue, that it's not fair on taxpayers to ask them to shoulder this cost. Yet it's considered completely fair and not an issue of any moral complexity to raise military expenditure to 3% of GDP. Like, I know this is leaning on the tough decisions that I talked about in the last video in this series, but it's really inescapable. My basic view is this: welfare spending should be whatever it needs to be to ensure that everyone is able to live. Not live in poverty, live comfortably. If it's too expensive, well, that's a matter of priorities and other policy failures that you, if you're in government, need to fix. There are a number of points really squeezed into this post, so I want to take it a bit at a time. Firstly, I want to tackle this notion that it's somehow easy to get benefits in this country, and particularly the ones given to disabled people. We've gone through an extended period in this country, probably stretching back to those weirdly creepy New Labour adverts, where we've had to live under this delusion that the benefit system is somehow easy to extract money from and cheat. And also that everyone is apparently lying. During this period, we've had successive governments tighten eligibility criteria, increase the frequency and rigor of assessments. Well, rigor, they've just made it harsher. In fact, if you apply for certain benefits, they automatically reject you and force you to appeal. If you don't believe me, that's fine. But I would suggest simply speaking to anyone who's actually had to engage with the welfare state in this country. I promise you, they'll tell you what I'm about to tell you, which is that getting benefits in this country, even if you're eligible, is really fucking hard and requires jumping through so many hoops as to make the process both extremely demoralizing and impossible. So no, it's not easy to get benefits because we've had multiple decades now of trying to make it harder. And fair play to the British political system, it managed to do that at least. Especially because this notion has permeated society that everyone is lying or cheating the system, which feels an awful lot like a you problem, more than a problem with the people who actually need support. Then there's this point about ADHD, anxiety, and being a bit depressed, not being valid criteria to receive disability benefits. Firstly, who the fuck is this guy to be able to determine where that line should be? Without getting too deep into my own stuff, let me tell you, no one is getting a personal independence payment for being a bit depressed, which I'm going to assume this person takes to mean like occasional low mood. Depression in this context, it means something. And low mood is not the only symptom of it, and let me be frank here. I've had depression. Incidentally, I'm probably going to get diagnosed for ADHD, so this does seem laser focused on pissing me off. I've been very fortunate that the impacts these have been limited. I am able to both function in my day-to-day life and in my job. This wasn't always the case. There was a period where it was much worse, and I don't want to get into any specifics, but there were definitely periods of my life where if I was in work, adjustments would have needed to be made for me. My point is that these things that he's described are disabling to various degrees, and to say they're not, or it's just a case of sucking it up and getting on with it, is beyond ignorant, cruel, and it's just not a reflection of reality. If you've never had depression, never known anyone with it, I am genuinely so happy that you and people in your life have been blessed in that way. It's just not a reasonable basis to say that these benefits are given too leniently. I personally believe that being a bit depressed is probably bad enough that you should get some support for it. Basically, anything where you would need adjustments to function should be getting some kind of additional support. Life does just cost more when you need more help. I'm sorry, that's a fact. Regardless of your living situation, I don't think that living with a partner means that these issues are suddenly resolved, unlike successive governments who have used that as a way to deprive a significant portion of people who would otherwise be eligible of benefits. It was actually why I was unable to claim for a while, because I lived with a partner. Then there's this frankly bizarre point about working people being exploited by a generous welfare state. I pay taxes, shocking no one, and I expect those taxes to be spent on people who aren't me. Shocking, I know. This goes beyond the sort of really nasty taxpayer value argument that people make, which is really worthy of its own shut the fuck up video. To explain quickly, there's an impression that's developed that any money taxed from you should be returning some kind of value to you, as if you're an investor. Taxes are not an investment made by you. You're not supposed to get a proportionate return into your pocket as if it was some kind of stock. Is it a bit annoying to look at my payslip and see how much goes to tax? No, not really. I'm mostly happy that there are things like schools, even though I don't have kids, hospitals, even though I'm relatively healthy, a fire service, even though my flat's not constantly on fire. And I'd quite like it to be the case that benefits paid for by taxes and by borrowing if we're in deficit were generous enough for people to live off easily. Because this is the thing. If you're currently in work, you are not exploited by a generous welfare state. Your conditions are improved because the more generous the welfare state is, the more power we have as workers to force concessions from capitalists. If there is less of a threat of destitution for striking or quitting your job because the conditions are shit, then that shifts power in our direction. If you want working people to be exploited less, one way is for us to actually take care of disabled people and people on benefits. There's a whole angle to this that's about work and this idea that work just brings more dignity than handouts, which in the context of the Auschwitz job center they used in one of their propaganda videos is not ideal. There's been this push to get people back into work, and without getting too deep into why that's nonsense, because that really would deserve its own video, for one, there are hardly any jobs to get people into, and it's really quite evil to do this while making it harder to get financial support for disabilities. Like, things like the personal independence payment are needed by people to actually function and get to work. It's not rocket science. It's not some bizarre plot to cheat you. These people need this money to function. It's that simple, I'm afraid. Taking this benefit away from some claimants will make them unable to work. You will reduce workforce participation. We are worsening the conditions of people who are doing what the government says they want them to do. It is, as you can probably tell, immensely frustrating. Starmer, when he tried to defend this, invoked his classic line about his toolmaker dad.
Prime Minister Sir Keir Starmer is defending the £5 billion worth of cuts to the welfare system announced yesterday, saying people should feel valued for working, like his dad, who, in his words, loved his job making tools.
Who may well have enjoyed his work. For all these people who say work improves your mental health, there's quite a bit missing in that sentiment, isn't there? They want to force people into work, but not into fulfilling jobs like being a tool maker. No, they want to force you into jobs that barely cover your rent. If you're lucky, where you're not secure, where your conditions are bad, and they want to discipline this reserve well of labour to push all of our conditions and wages down. Not to be Blink-182 about it, but work sucks. I know, especially low-paid, insecure work, which is what you'd be forced into if you were in this position. It's also important to remember that people who aren't in work do things like childcare, care for their family members, and interestingly, a lot are forced to care for disabled loved ones because of policies like this. If you've made it this far into the video and you're not convinced, you think this is the rant of a person who just doesn't get it, that this is in fact morally justified, that it isn't counterproductive policy, that it's not an escalation in the social murder of disabled people that even the UN have condemned at this point. I don't know what to say to you. Fix your hearts. Go talk to someone who actually has to deal with this stuff. Otherwise, if you still think benefits are too generous to the extent that you can take the piss and live better than if you're in work, and you think disability benefits are super easy to get, I have a simple challenge for you. Quit your job. Quit your job, apply for benefits, and see how far you get. I'm going to go out on a limb and say that you'll find yourself in a worse state than you were with a job. If you're unwilling to take on that challenge, because you know this is the case, and you know that cheating the system is basically too much effort for too little reward, and you still support this, maybe you should just accept that you're an awful person. Almost certainly ableist, and almost certainly a dickhead. To that point, I have to ask that you consider shutting the fuck up about benefits being too generous. That's it. It's that simple. Put your money where your mouth is, or shut your fucking mouth. That's the video, everyone. I need to thank my proofreader, who enjoyed the shorter script, I have to admit, and also Molto, who made the baseline image of me slapping that guy for the thumbnail that you'll see over and over again. I'm going to get a lot of use out of this one, I think. And I also need to thank the patrons and members. If you want the videos early, if you want to vote on the topics, if you want to see maybe some exclusive video from my trip to Spain, who knows, the Patreon and YouTube membership programs are where you go. And a special shout out to the top tier patrons, Drone Riff, Mercutio, John N, and Liron, and a special shout out to the YouTube members, Nadir Jiwa, Katie Marshall, Roger Zugi, Scaly Bubble, and Ben Johnson. This is one that I've recorded really quickly, but the script was written pretty fast, so some things will have probably moved between writing, recording, and publishing. But yeah, that's the video, and be on the lookout for the next one. There will be one more before I go to Spain. And with that, take it easy, everyone. Bye.